So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio Reading and for my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited to be joined by the fantastic Richard Bacon. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Matthew. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. And how are you?
Yeah, fine. I'm just talking to you in a hotel room. I'm in London at White City House, which is a hotel room at Television Centre, the old studios, a place I have a 25-year relationship with and two. I still work here, but I actually live in Los Angeles, so I'm here making a couple of TV shows in England.
I mean, that I suppose is a good sort of point to start with. I mean, obviously living in LA, how has the last couple of years been with, the lockdowns and everything? How have you coped with it all?
It's okay there because it's more of an outdoors place. It's more spread out. You've got nicer weather most of the time, almost all the time, really. And so it's a bit less social. It's still social, but it's not as intense as London or or as Birmingham or Manchester. It's just a bit slower, and people stay home a bit more anyway, or they will have people over. A big thing, one of the reasons that LA is a better place to live than to visit, and I always think, I lived in New York as well. New York is a better place to visit than to live. Because when you visit New York, anyone who's ever been there, before your plane touches down, they go, well, you got to go to this restaurant and go to this bar and go to this museum. And in LA, it's a bit less obvious. I mean, sure, people will say, go to Disneyland and go to Malibu, but the actual, what is the coolest restaurant or the most fun or interesting restaurant, what are the most fun things to go to, are often you sort of have to be here a bit and get to know people a bit. And some of the most interesting things happen at people's houses. And obviously in lockdown, that was restricted too. But as lockdown eased, but restaurants were still closed, you were allowed to start going around people's houses. So that thing that I've always enjoyed about LA came back fairly quickly. I mean, obviously the deepest lockdown is boring like it is to anyone else. It was still boring at times. And I've got two young kids, they're 7 and 10 now. Obviously younger than that when lockdown started, but and they're homeschooling all the time. So all the same annoyances are there. But it wasn't, on average, it wasn't too bad, I suppose.
I mean, did you find you were still able to do kind of your usual work from home, or did it become quite tricky? Because obviously, while you're in LA, for anyone who isn't aware, obviously you work a lot behind the scenes on various TV shows. So how was that to sort of manage that?
Well, the thing that was annoying is things get delayed. And I know that's true of lots of people in lots of professions, and people listening to this will have had that experience. But I'm quite new to what I do for a living is I invent TV shows, but in particular game shows. And I'm soon going to start moving on to inventing reality television shows and talent shows. And at the moment I have, shows in America and Britain. But I'd only just started this career. I was in hospital myself 3 years ago at Lewisham Hospital in a coma. And I decided after that to start inventing game shows. And then I also produce them and write them. I also sell them to the networks. And I had this amazing run of selling a couple in America and selling a couple here. And then COVID hits and it just puts this sort of, annoying delay on. All the shows I've invented, all three of them that are on TV now, there's more coming, but all of them have a studio element. And that's not brilliant for COVID. I mean, we've worked out how to get around it a bit by spacing out and masks, but it means you can't have a studio audience. The things that you plan to give the show energy and make it an event kind of don't happen, and they got delayed. It did have negative consequences, and it slowed things down. I have a show on BBC One called This Is My House, where 4 people all pretend to be the same person and pretend a house is theirs. 3 of the contestants are actors, and 1 is real, and a panel of celebrities have to work out whose house it really is. And it's a show about prejudice, really, and it's absurd and cartoony. I managed to film that in the teeth of lockdown last December and January, which was quite cool to actually get that done. And we're just starting production next week on the 2nd season. I managed to get that done. It came with restrictions. There were things about the show that would have been better if it weren't for COVID. And no viewer knows that. So if a viewer says, oh, that bit was boring, or that bit didn't look very good, what I want to say to them is, well, it was practically shot on security cameras on a shelf because it wasn't allowed any camera people. No one knows the bit that looks a bit cheap. Yeah, you can't like put a graphic on the screen going, well, this is how I'd like to have done it. No one knows. But if you don't find a way around it, you have the delay. The delay at the beginning was impossible. So we're not filming anything for a while. But then, like anyone in my industry, and frankly, in most industries, is you have to find a way to work around it. Otherwise, you don't work. And then you've not got any income, you ain't got a job. So you have to find a way to work around it. And each of these shows employs, well, my American one probably employs 200 people. So you have to find a way to work around it and accept that it isn't going to be quite as good as you wanted it to be. But it's that or nothing.
And I mean, I imagine that, I mean, what's the average kind of time frame from when you initially have the idea and then getting it to obviously to air? What's the kind of the average time frame for that?
Well, there isn't an average because it can really vary. I mean, the process of I have a show on ABC, which is a network in America called The Hustler. We've had 2 seasons so far. It's a show about a liar on a team, and hosted by Craig Ferguson, who James Corden took over from on the Late Late Show on CBS in America. Craig is Scottish, and he now lives back in Scotland. But that it's hard to explain. It's like you might have, like, I had an idea, which was, I think it'd be interesting to do a game show where one contestant has been given all the answers to the questions and no one knows. And then I was like, that's good, but it needs to be more than that. I parked it for like 2 years, carried on being a presenter on the radio, came back to it, no, that was good. Now, what about if they're on a team and with each question, they get the rest of the team or the whole team get a very personal clue about who on the team is the liar, aka the hustler. So the clue might say the hustler is a conservative member of the Conservative Party. The hustler is a teacher. The hustler has never been abroad. The hustler collects copies of the Beano, whatever. I mean, better clues than that. But it's the hustler's really passionate about opera. And so it then becomes a game of prejudice because you look at the other people on the team and the hustler has to disguise themselves. And you go, oh, you look like you're into opera. You look like a policeman or a teacher. You're a Tory. And of course, we cast it sometimes against type and sometimes for type. So that's the game. But for me, I'm like, okay, first bit was have someone who's got the answers. That's not enough. Oh my God, if you give them the clue, there. Okay, now I've got a show. Then I put in eliminations. And then there's I worked out the final, which is just a big argument between 3 people, and they have to come to a 2-1 decision about who the hustler is. But it's not that linear. It's have a bit of an idea, come back to it another time. So there isn't an average time. The fastest I've ever done it, I'm making a pilot next week for Channel 4 called Silence is Golden. Silence is golden, where a studio audience have to remain silent, otherwise they lose all their money. And I throw horror, comedy at them, reunite people, put snakes under chairs, bring out Jimmy Carr, all sorts of things. And that I wrote that, had the idea in this hotel whilst I was filming. I literally just told you. Now, I literally just told you is my new game show. Sorry, got a call there. And it is my new game show. I literally just told you it's my new game show that's on Channel 4 at the moment. It's a game show about short-term memory. I thought, oh my God, I think you could do a game show where you give the contestants the answers and they'll just still get the questions wrong. It's like when you go to a party and you can't remember the names of the people that you've met. And we filmed that in August and it's on TV now, but it started in December. But I had that idea whilst filming that, and I just wrote it really quickly, gave it to Channel 4, and they picked up a pilot straight away. So I'm filming the pilot next Wednesday. Now that's very unusually quick from idea in August, write it. Maybe I sent it in September, I can't remember. They went, yeah, let's do it. Were it not for Omicron, we'd have shot it on the 16th of December. That's as fast as it can possibly be.
And I mean, would you say that the fact that you've had that kind of presenting background in the past, and you've obviously done that, would you say that that kind of helps with creating these shows? And maybe, sort of, because I know that when I spoke to Andi Peters last year, he said that a lot of people enjoy working with him because he knows what, he kind of has been on the presenter side and knows what the presenters are thinking. So would you say that helps you a bit? Definitely.
And I think that's a really good question. And I know Andy, and we were talking about game show idea last week. Occasionally I present Good Morning Britain and Andy's on there too. Andy was an executive at Channel 4. When I got fired off the children's show Blue Peter, which I did when I was 22, a long time ago because I'm 46 now, Andy was an executive at Channel 4 overseeing The Big Breakfast. And he hired me to be the roving reporter on The Big Breakfast under the reign of Johnny Vaughan and Denise Van Outen. But he's right. When I visualize a TV show or a game show, I visualize it from the viewpoint of the presenter. And also, there's a big French presenter I'm working with at the moment, a little bit, called Arthur Essenbag. And he writes shows too. And you realize the advantages. It's not just that you can see it from the viewpoint of the presenter. Because you've been on the stage, in front of the camera, you've done shows that are live and as live and not live. You just have a feel for like the moments that play and the moments that just gives you a feel for the moments that work. It just gives you one. You do it for long enough and I just can write something and go, that'll work, that'll work, that'll work. And if you haven't had that job, you may instinctively develop that just by watching lots of television. You may do, but as a presenter who's done a lot, and I've also hosted a lot of different types of TV and radio shows. And so therefore it's not even, I've not consciously tried to develop it, but it's there. And also on The Big Breakfast that Andi Peters put me on, when you're a host on that show, you have to be a producer of it too. It was 2 hours long and it was so hungry for ideas that you had to come up with ideas for the next day all the time. But that's a great show. But instinctively, that place, the audience are like that. And it's built on that. And so I think it's a very good question, Matthew, because I think having done so much presenting, it is absolutely a significant advantage for inventing the shows, knowing what moments play on television, but also selling it. So when I go into rooms at NBC, ABC, or Netflix, at Channel 4, the BBC, or ITV, I go full on presenting. And now I pitch on Zoom, but it's the same. I do a full on present. I did a big pitch to NBC on Monday. I'm doing a big pitch to Netflix next week. And I full on write a script and I present it like a presenter.
I mean,
sometimes when I pitch a game show, I'll do it with contestants in the room. We're going to like a meeting room, boardroom, the table. And I'll bring contestants and I'll play the game as host. And most producers can't bring it to life as host. They can do it a bit, but most of them can't do it as well as someone with my background.
And I mean, I was going to say, obviously having done, shows both in America and the UK, do you find that the audiences differ, and maybe even the execs that work at the TV networks, would you say they differ from the UK to America?
America, the main difference is that America, it's a slightly boring answer, but America is just a much bigger market. They also give you much quicker answers. A thing that does piss you off about British television is that it's such a small market. Britain thinks it's a bigger market than it is because everyone, you can go, oh, but look, there's BBC One and BBC Two and Channel 4, there's Channel 5. There's Dave and there's Sky and there's Sky One and there's Sky Crime and there's it looks like there's endless channels. If you, Matthew, started inventing game shows, you'd realize there aren't endless channels. And you look at the game show, you look at the nature of the game show, what it is, and you realize, oh, probably only realistically 2 places are going to buy it. And in America, there's a lot more choice. And not only that, in America, they'll give you a quick answer. You do a pitch, and in 3 days, they'll come back and say, yes, no, or we're going to take it into development, which are basically your 3 options. Yes, no, development. And if they give you a no, they'll give you a nice, lovely reason, and they've thought about it. And in Britain, you can just get an endless thing where it's going to take 6 months, and it's not fair on companies. And I push them for an answer now because I'm getting more experienced at it. What's nice about Britain is it's everyone kind of knows each other. And I think you can ultimately take more risks in Britain. You just can. There isn't a broadcast network in America that's really the equivalent to Channel 4 or BBC Two, really. It's like all of by broadcast, I mean not cable and not Netflix, not Disney Plus, etc., not Apple TV. The broadcast networks are ABC, NBC, CBS. There's one called the CW, and there's Fox. And basically, CW is like Channel 5, and all the other 4 are ITV. So if you want to launch a show that's a bit different, like Gogglebox, I like to think I literally just told you it's a bit different. BBC Two and Channel 4 are really good for that. and that's a big advantage. We don't in America. We don't have those. So that's for me. That's the real upside.
No, I mean, do you remember where the interest in TV first came for you? TV and radio first came for you. Was it something that was instant, or did it sort of come over time for you?
I mean, radio is what I was really interested in, and I started in BBC local radio at Radio Nottingham, and when I was 17, I got work experience there on the Saturday night music show called The Beat, and I was really enthusiastic, and they asked me to join the breakfast show as a roving reporter. They paid me £12 for each piece that I did. I'd go and interview counsellors or do a silly story. And then I'd go into the station and edit a package together of a report. But I was like an anorak of radio. I even knew where the transmitters were in my part of Nottinghamshire. And so it was very much radio. And I started going to London to interview movie stars at junkets, which is where a movie star comes into a room of like 20 journalists, and then maybe 3 of you will go into one room to ask them a couple of questions each. And through doing that, someone at a cable TV channel offered me an audition, and I did the audition, did 1 day on air, got a job, moved to London at 20 to be a full-time presenter and reporter on this cable channel owned by the Daily Mirror. And then after a year of that, or was it a year and a half? I wasn't there that long. I think it was only a year. I moved quick. Tim Vincent left Blue Peter, and I sent a letter and a tape of my highlights of live TV, which were just me getting into trouble. I actually deliberately picked what other people would consider lowlights, which was just me getting into trouble all the time. And they liked that. And then I got into Blue Peter, and got into trouble. But I didn't intend either to be on air or work in television.
I mean, would you say that there's sort of a favourite? Like, obviously, I know you said that obviously radio is where it started for you, but I mean, do you still love the fact that you've got that variety? You can do a bit of TV, you can then go and do some radio, and then obviously, executive producing as well. Did you love that, the fact that it kind of no day's the same really for you?
Yeah, that's a good point, Matthew. And I think that at the moment when I occasionally host GMB, it allows me to do some news interviews, and I worked on a station called BBC Radio 5 Live for a long time, and I did loads of I covered both Obama's elections and royal weddings and all sorts, and it's also daily news, and I still have that hunger. And when a Boris Johnson garden party's blowing up, I do think, I miss being on air talking about the news. Most on a day-to-day basis, I don't want to do the news anymore. I moved on to, I want to create things that appear in different countries that have a relative permanence. They don't have a real permanence, but they, that you can have an idea and that idea gets replicated in different countries and can live for a few years. And you can make an episode if it's really funny. The second episode, if I literally just told you, is just objectively funny, I think. And you just see people are passing it around and talking about it. The problem with the live radio is you can have a great day and it's kind of gone. I used to do music radio, which I slightly preferred to news radio because it was more creative. But you could just do the funniest thing on there and it's kind of gone. And even, I know the shows have podcasts, but they're still kind of gone. I sort of prefer this process of working hard to make 6 1-hours rather than doing 5 3-hour shows in a week. But I like doing a little bit. I don't do any radio at all now, and I will do again at some point. I might start a podcast where I do long interviews with people. I think it's like Radio X. I used to do swing shifts at Radio 2. I'd quite like to do swing shifts at Radio X where I can be naughty, or maybe a bit of LBC. But then again, I think about doing Good Morning Britain occasionally is, every couple of months I do a few episodes. I think that satisfies the news itch. I'm not sure I need to do more than that. It's just don't need to, like a bit of it. I'd quite like to do some music radio again. No way full time, but I'd love to just do some swing shifts.
So will we be seeing you again on Good Morning Britain? Are you hoping to go back again soon?
I think they'll have me back. I think, I get on with everyone there and I like it. And I live in America, but I have 2 series in production here, probably a third coming up. Then they go in the edit, and then I've got new ones coming down the line. I'm going to start my own company in June and bring more ideas here. So I live in Los Angeles, but I more or less come here every month, and I'm quite bored of the flight.
Now, I mean, we must, of course, also talk a bit about the amazing NHS and what an amazing job they do. I mean, what's your sort of opinion been of the NHS and what the job they do?
Well, when I was in a coma in when was it? 3.5 years ago, I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I was short of breath. And it started in America the day before I came home for the summer, and I got on the plane. I was hallucinating. I ended up in Lewisham, and when you go to Lewisham Hospital, when you report to the front desk and say you're short of breath, they take it very seriously. And they sort of moved quickly, did a chest X-ray, said, "I'm sorry, we've got to induce you into a coma." And the gap between them telling me I needed to be in a coma and actually being in the coma was only 4 minutes. But it was, I think, something like 40 people, 40 people looked after me in NHS Lewisham. A consultant called Vic saved my life. My blood oxygen went to 58. I turned blue, and they got the crash equipment, and I was within, I think, certainly less than a minute, probably a few seconds of dying. And then I live in America where you pay for the healthcare. So to my friends in America, when I said, well, look, when I left, and I said to Vic, the consultant, "Thank you." I know you don't need to thank me. And this is 40 people have saved my life. I was in a coma for 9 days. I was on life support for 12 days. There's just so much equipment in ICU. Yeah, so I've become acutely aware of COVID, and I've supported some of the restrictions because I don't want hospitals to be overwhelmed. And people say, "Oh, just grow ICU." Being in ICU is like being on a bed in the cockpit of an airplane. There's just so much equipment. Well, it's like saying build a factory 2 weeks Wednesday. And so, I became aware of how nice they are. I became aware of just how many of them have come from abroad to work in our hospitals and save our lives. And that's why some of Brexit upset me, because part of Brexit was not wanting foreigners to come here. I'm like, God, that 40% of a lot of ICUs are saving British lives. And if you put a quota on them, you'd have fewer of them. And they're just kind and nice. And in the country I live in, because I have a decent income, in fact, you don't have to have a decent income. That's just nonsense. I don't even know why I said that. You could get a bill for $500,000, for being on ICU for 12 days. For 14 days. No, yeah, 12 days. I did 2 extra days just in the downgraded bit. But you could get a big bill you can't afford to pay for that. And here, because I still work here and pay taxes here, I didn't get one. And so, I know it has its problems and it's hard, but it's an amazing thing. And I think as a civilized society, what we do is we pay money into a generic pot, and it's actually quite moving that some of the money you pay in taxes goes into a pot in the middle and will be used to save the life of someone you never meet. And so I find the whole thing very moving.
And I mean, is there any messages you'd like to give to the NHS and of course, to any of the patients?
Well, I think Reading is a great city. I was in Reading. I was actually in Reading recently. I went to the University of Reading to film part of a Channel 4 documentary about cancel culture. And I interviewed some academics there and spent some time on the campus, only like 2 months ago. I think I might have gone a second time to Reading. But yes, I stayed in the Holiday Inn in Reading. I went to an absolutely brilliant Indian restaurant. I wish I could remember its name. It's not that far from the Holiday Inn. I was amazed by how good it was, and it was really unique and different. Anyway, it's not much of a recommendation because I can't remember its name. But my message to the NHS generally is that I think it must be exciting to have a job with such purpose. I know that they work really hard, and they are appreciated though. I think most people really appreciate them. We know that, but it's also at times you feel guilty because there are people who don't work as hard who get paid more money than these people who work so hard and get paid less money. But fundamentally, I think the upside I hope is that it's a job with such meaning and purpose to have almost any job in the NHS, that we're humans and we're fallible and we're vulnerable and we're here temporarily, and I very much hope there's an afterlife, but I'm an atheist, and when you extrapolate what to be an atheist means, it becomes quite profound, which is, oh my God, we're just here for a bit. And these people that keep us alive are, they are doing God's work, even though I don't think God exists. And I think it's, in some ways I envy them, because it's not a job I can do. I don't have the patience. I like people. I'm good at people. But I'm not, when I have to learn technical things, imagine how technical it is to be a consultant, to be an anaesthetist. I don't have ADHD, and I'm just not really, I couldn't really have got my head around it. But I love them fundamentally. I really love them. And it's something that we should be enormously proud of, and a right to be proud of, but also a tiny bit jealous of them, because I think to save someone's life and go home and know that you did that, I hope that just brings you enormous professional satisfaction over and above what most people get to experience.
And of course, is there anything you'd like to say to the patients who are currently in hospital at the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I hope you're okay, and I hope you get better. And some of the people listening to me, maybe they won't get better. It's always a difficult thing, because you don't want to. People are at different stages of their care. But I suppose know that you're in a great city, in a hospital that is part of an organisation that most countries in the world don't have. And by the way, of course, there's healthcare that is funded by taxes and the government in quite a few European countries, but there's nothing quite like the NHS. And just know that in a few days, well, a couple of weeks, but I go back to America, we just don't have this. And sometimes it's going to annoy you. Sometimes it will get things wrong, because it's a giant complex operation. Sometimes unforgivable mistakes will be made too. This is an imperfect system that's very difficult. But at the same time, averaged out, it's magnificent. And I hope that the care you're getting is really good. I think we can be, if there are things that are annoying you that are on the smaller side, I just think we have to learn to let that go, because people's jobs are hard and difficult, and staff are dropping left, right, and centre because of Omicron. So this must be a challenging time for all of you. But I guess just know that the NHS, our version of healthcare, is the best in the world, and that's what you're experiencing right now. So you're not in the best place in your life because you're in hospital. It's just a statement of fact. I'm talking to you on what is definitely not the best day of your life, because you're in a hospital, but you are inside the best healthcare system in the world. And I hope that can bring you some comfort.
Now, I just want to say, Rich, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time. Of course, keep safe. Yeah. And hopefully we'll get to speak again one day.
Brilliant. You too, Matthew. That was a great interview. You asked terrific questions. I love interviewing people. And you were very good at listening and asking another question based on my answer, which I think is the art of interviewing.